So my name is Lisa Lepke, and I am part of the ProWritingAid team. My favorite part of my job, for sure, is meeting writers and authors who have managed to make a successful career out of making up stories. And I love interrogating them and learning as much as I possibly can so that I can then steal that and use it in my own writing life. And today is no exception, because I'm super thrilled to welcome Carolyn Brown. Carolyn was born in Texas and raised in Oklahoma, and she is the author of more than 100 books. She sold more than 6 million copies and has been translated into 19 foreign languages. We're dropping a link to her website in the chat now so you can have a look. And her newest book, Second Chance at Sunflower Ranch, came out in June, but she also has this incredible back catalog of books that you should all dip into if you want to have a real masterclass in writing romance. So Carolyn, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be here.
So I should just alert everyone that there's a lot of wind and potential storm warnings in where Carolyn is, so that we have a little bit of a delay going on. We're blaming the winds for a slightly delayed internet connection. So just be patient. Sometimes there's a bit of a delay. So I'll ask my questions and then we'll just let Carolyn go off on all of her stories so she can tell us how she got to where we are today. So Carolyn, how did it all begin?
It all began when I was about 3 years old, and I saw my child, and she would not sleep at night. She just would not sleep. She didn't cry. She just didn't want to go to sleep. She's still a night owl. She's 48. She's still a night owl. But I didn't have anything to write with, but my husband and I had been talking about a book for many years, and I picked up a pencil and a spiral back notebook, and I started to write. And a few weeks later, my husband brought me home a typewriter, an old Underwood with keys about this tall, folks. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because I had a typewriter. But that book did not sell. It did not sell for 40 years. And finally, I rewrote it, and the heroine, the hero in it, Seth Thomas, grew older as I rewrote the book. So when I started the book, he was in his 16, 17, 20 years old. 40 years later, he was 80. And it sold, and it's called The Lilac Bouquet. So that's where I got the start. But now, for 20 years, I tried to get a foot in the door to publish books. Tried my best. Sent out query letters. Those were the days when you sent them out by mail, and you had to send a stamped addressed envelope to get your answer back. Sent them out. Nothing. And I kept going. So all you authors out there, don't give up. You can publish if you'll just stay with it. And today you have more options than we had in 1997. So I just kept trying until one day I got a call, and Hillary Sayers from Kensington said, I want to buy both the books you have sent me the proposals on. And I about fainted. I thought it was a joke. Somebody was playing a joke on me, but it wasn't. I sold her those 2 books, sold 2 more. Line died. By then I was working for Avalon. And not long after that, I started working for Source Books. Not long after that, I started working for Amazon. So it's just been a process for all that time.
Will you tell everyone how old you were when that call came in, when you sold your first book?
Just before I was 50.
So for everyone who's watching who, like me, is worried they might have missed their moment, there's still time. We can still do it.
Of course you can do it, darling. There is no reason why you can't.
Yes,
if
yes.
You've got a story, you've got, actually, I wouldn't want to offend anyone here, but at 49, 50 in that age group, you have more life experience. You have more to draw on than you might have at 20 or at 19.
Mhm.
Those are years to be living. When you get to be 40s and 50s, you're still living, but you've got more to draw on, more experience.
I'm wiser to the world and how all of these relationships work, right? I'd like to think that anyway.
Of course you are. So to all of you out there who aren't spring chickens anymore, although you still look like a spring chicken, enjoy life, and just the experiences that you're having will come up in your books. The people you meet, the people you see on the street, they become real in your books.
And
So,
have you always been an observer? Do you watch all of the people everywhere you go and pick apart the interesting bits?
yes, ma'am, I surely do. And one character may be a culmination of 4 or 5 people I know. So yes, you watch people, I don't know, that's just inspiration.
Yeah, I love that. So did you always want to be a writer? Were you one of those kids that always had a notebook and that always had their nose buried in a book?
No, I was just a storyteller. I always had my nose buried in a book, but my brother and my sister, who were younger than me, they had to listen to my stories. So I was the storyteller. Some of them were pretty bad.
But that's fine. That's how it starts, right? Everybody starts. We just did an interview with Julie Cohen, and she said the thing she didn't know is that everybody starts out bad, and then you get better, and then you learn what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My first 4 books, I got the rights back to them. I was given that, and I self-pubbed them. And then just as they were, I didn't do anything to them. But recently I had the opportunity to sell them to a trade publisher, and I redid them. I was amazed at how much they needed redone. They were pretty bad. Not only just in the fact that in 1997 there was no cell phones or laptops or all that stuff that we have now, but the writing itself was not as good as it should have been and could have been. So I was very glad to redo those 4 and get them resold.
I mean, now that you're 100 books in, there must be so much that you've learned between when you wrote those first books that got sold and everything that you've learned between then and now.
Yes, absolutely. Learning about marketing, promotion, basically point of view, just writing in general. My theory is that when you stop learning, you might as well just go ahead and die. You're finished.
You're done.
So, you're done.
But I think a lot of people think that writing is something that you're born to do. And I think that's something that I have always loved writing, but I thought, that's something that authors do. That's something like that you're born with some sort of genius. And I didn't. It's only recently, in my 40s that I've kind of really understood how much of it is a learned process and how much of it is technical and how much of it is, just things like your scene needs to have this, this, and this, or it's not going to work. And I think the idea that you can learn to write a book is really empowering.
Right. Absolutely. You're so right. There are people who can't write a decent book. I've met some of them, but their problem is that they're not willing to learn. They think, this is my baby. I'm not changing a word of it. I refuse to listen to my editors. I do not want to do what they tell me to do or what they suggest that I do. So they're not willing to learn. And that is a very big part of writing, is learning how to go about it. When you stop when you have that mindset, you're not going to go very far. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I agree. So I've got a few questions here from various people, but I'd love to know what you most love about writing. What's the thing that gets you out of bed every morning?
Escape.
Really?
Pure escape. I have a sign right in front of me, sitting right over here. It says, I know the voices are not real, but they have really great ideas.
Yeah, so can you really dive into your world and just cut out everything?
Yes, I have tunnel vision. When I'm writing a book, that's what I'm doing. My characters are in my head. They're very real. As a matter of fact, they're so real, sometimes they wake me up at night and tell me that I didn't write the last chapter right. So I have to go back and redo it.
Yeah.
Or they won't shut up and let me sleep. So I am into what I write. I mean, I am in it. I'm in the moment. I cry with them. I laugh with them.
And you return to the same characters a lot, don't you? Do they continue bubbling around in your brain and so that you can revisit them?
Yes. As a matter of fact, sometimes you forget what's real and what's fictional.
I love that idea that everything can become so real that you're not even sure whether something actually happened or something that you wrote.
You bet. I dragged my feet on the last 2 chapters of a standalone book because I don't want to tell them goodbye.
Oh, yeah.
So I am just very into my characters. I have a very large family, and they know when I'm writing, that's what I'm doing.
And they respect that?
They respect that.
So Carolyn was telling me that this is her writing room, and so you can see up behind her, she's got all of her book covers on the wall. And tell me tell them what you told me about the ones behind you in the black frame.
The ones in the black frames, my publisher, Montlake Romance, sends to me when I have published or sold, when I have sold 100,000 copies of that book. And there's 23 of them up here on the wall.
Okay, so characters. You're talking about characters. Do you start with characters for the most part? Is that your jumping off point for your books?
Yes. Yes. My characters. Okay, here's what I tell people when I'm talking to, when they ask me if I'm a pantster or a plotster. I start out being a plotter for about 5 chapters. And it's kind of like I am the pilot of a big jet airplane. And I put all my characters in the passenger seats, and I'm the pilot. I know where I'm going. And about 5 chapters in, the characters hijack the plane. And they tell me where we're going. And that's when the adventure begins. That's when the adventure all starts and begins. And they tell me where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And I listen.
You just follow instructions, and maybe you end up in Hawaii, and maybe you end up in the Antarctic. Yeah.
Or right now down on the beach in South Texas with a hurricane.
Yeah. Which, probably isn't where you want to be, but probably makes for a great story.
Yeah. That's where we are writing these days. So, yeah, the characters run the story for me.
Okay, so you told me what you most love about writing. What do you find most difficult about writing?
Saggy middles.
Saggy middles, right? Yeah.
You have told, by the time you get to the middle of your story, it's kind of like climbing a mountain. Writing a book is climbing the mountain. You start at the bottom and you climb to the top. Well, that top is your saggy middle, believe it or not, even though it's the top of the mountain. And you better have something there that is it's either an argument or something that is going to happen right there that will keep your reader reading. If not, they're going to slide back down the wrong side and put the book to the side and probably never buy another one. So what you want to do is really have something big right there in that saggy middle.
It's so hard. I feel like so many authors get that wrong because they know where they want to start and they know where they want to go. And then in the middle of like, it just gets a bit murky.
Right, right. So you've got to remember when you begin, and you may know where you're going to start and you may know where you're going to end, basically. But that middle part is as important as the whole rest of the book.
Yeah, I agree. So when it comes to editing, you said you start off with a plan and then the plan goes all over the place and then you get to the end of your first draft. Where do you go next? Are you someone that shows that to anyone else or do you keep it all tight? And how many drafts do you end up going through?
My husband is a retired English teacher.
Oh, that's handy.
I'm very fortunate. He's also an author. He writes mystery and he's got 11 books out there. But he reads my first rough edit, my first rough draft. So he reads that for me and puts in the commas that I am horrible at and all those things.
Everybody's horrible at commas. We all need your husband.
Yeah. So he takes care of that. Then I send it in to my editor. My developmental editor goes through 3 edits with me. The first one I block off 40 hours off my calendar for. The second one about 20 to 30 hours to get it going. And the third one's just an overnight grammatical thing. Then it goes to the copy editor at the publishing house. Then it goes to the proof editor and then a final or a cold read. So what is that? 7, 8 edits? Besides what I do is I write. Yeah, and that's on each book.
And so what are the most important things that you think you get back from your developmental editor? Because I think people never are quite sure how that relationship works. How is it useful for you?
I love my developmental editor. She pushes me out to the edge of the cliff and ties a rope around me and threatens to kick me off. She is amazing. I ask for her. We have been through many books together. She can see what I need to do to strengthen the plot or the character. I write very fast. So she helps me slow it down and write more emotion into the book. She will say off to the side here, we need some emotion here. We need an emotional response. We need to feel something here. And so I really like her. And copy and proof editing is just what it says, just making sure the eye color isn't green on page 1 and brown on page 42. So yeah, but if you can have a good developmental editor, listen to her. She'll be good for you.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard, when like you were saying before, some people have created their babies and then to have someone come in and say, I'm sure a lot of times they get feedback like a whole subplot isn't working or a whole character isn't working. It must be hard. Do you find it hard to say goodbye to your babies?
Sometimes. I have dropped characters. I've dropped subplots. I have written a whole new beginning, a whole new chapter of a beginning. And when I got finished, I looked at it and I thought, she is a genius. So yeah, yeah, I really do listen to my editor because I feel like she has guided me well.
Well, and I think it's so hard to see your own writing sometimes because things exist in your own head that you feel like have made it onto the pages but haven't. Like there's maybe tastes of it, but
Right. One of my very first editor ever in 1997 told me, she said, I want to taste what my character is, what your character is tasting. I want to see it. I want to feel it. I want to hear it. She said, I even want to get the taste of red Oklahoma dirt in my mouth when I read this. So it was very, very good advice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I was saying, Carolyn's books always take me slightly longer to read because I read all of her dialogue in a slow Southern drawl, which I think is sort of amazing because it just somehow you put me, it's almost like your settings are another character in your book. Like I just feel that world so intensely. And I've never been to Oklahoma, but I feel like I have a sense of it from your books.
That is one of the best compliments I've ever had right there. If an author can make a reader feel emotion, if they can make them mad, if they can make them happy. I've had readers write to me and say, I hated this one character, absolutely hated her. And it was so good to be able to hate somebody. So
it's good to have a nemesis in a book, isn't it?
Right. That's what we strive for, is to touch emotion. Anybody can tell a dry story.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to touch emotion.
Well, and that's what makes romance so magical, isn't it? I mean, have you always written romance? Have you ever dipped your toes into any other genres?
Well, I write women's fiction with just a little thread of romance in it. Mm-hmm. And I've got quite a few of those. Most of what's on the wall behind me is women's fiction. Okay. I've written cowboys, I've written historical, contemporary, but it's pretty much been romance, except for my women's fiction, which romance it has the thread, but it's not the absolute center of the story. Friendship is.
Right. Okay. Well, I was talking in our introduction for the summit yesterday. I actually used your book, The Ladies' Room, as an example, because it's one that I read recently and I just loved it. And I was saying that so often romance books we have a very broad definition of romance, sort of anything that has a love story. But I feel like that book isn't really about her relationship with, what's his name? Billy Ray?
Billy Lee.
Billy Lee, with the hunk next door. It's not really about that relationship. That book is about Trudy finding herself and finding her power and becoming everything that she was supposed to be, right?
Yes. That was actually my first women's fiction book. My agent said to me that my books were beginning to lean in the direction of women's fiction rather than just contemporary romance, because I had so much friendship and women's empowerment in them. Yeah. So I wrote the book. It's one of the only full-length book that I have ever written in first person. So I wrote it. Yeah, I've written a little novella in first person, but not a full length. And so I wrote the book, sent it to her. She sent it out to lots of people, and I already had probably 50 books under my belt. And nobody wanted it because I wasn't known in the women's fiction world. So we shortened it to the right word length. And Avalon, that was one of the last books Avalon bought before Amazon bought the company and bought me with it, and which was a very good thing for me. But that has been my all-time best-selling book, and it is set in the town where I grew up.
I love that town.
Tishomingo, Oklahoma. I now share a room at the Historical Museum there with Blake Shelton and Gene Autry and Tiara.
Not bad. So it's not bad. You're keeping good company.
Yeah.
But I think
right.
We said in the beginning with this summit, we're calling it a romance writing summit, but we're not limiting ourselves to, very traditional romance. We're talking about anything that has romance within it as a subplot. So maybe you're writing sci-fi and it's got romance in it. Maybe you're writing women's literature and there's a romance within it, because ultimately all of it is about relationships, right? And it's about connection and
Right.
about finding something within yourself that resonates through that relationship with someone else.
Right. Absolutely. Relationships, what it's all about, whether it's friendship, relationship as in we're going to get married at the end of this book, or we're just going to live together at the end of this book, or whatever. But it's all about relationship. That first editor I told you about also told me that you can't take a man and a woman or two people or whatever and set them down on a blanket under a pretty shade tree and let them fall in love. You've got to throw rocks at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes I forget just how big the rock is and I throw boulders.
But that's exciting, right?
Yeah. So you need to remember there needs to be conflict. So you can't, like I say, you can't give them a basket of fried chicken and say, go fall in love on that blanket over there. You've got to give them something to have to work toward a relationship. But I think that's life. We don't get it all sweet and glorious. It's not all rainbows and unicorn toots.
It's not. Hopefully there's a little bit of rainbow and a little bit of unicorn toots, but in among the rest of it. But that's just one part of a big picture, right?
Right. So you need to have some of the conflict in the book, and
so,
a lot of times that conflict is a lot of times that can be your sagging middle.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how you can keep things moving along. And so how do you, because in a couple of the books that you've read, some of your characters are quite imperfect and sometimes they do things that, maybe aren't that likable. How do you make sure that your reader is cheering them on at all times? Because you need to get your reader on side, right?
Yeah, you pray a lot. Nobody's perfect. And sometimes they say you write what you know. There isn't I don't think I could write a 20-year-old model in New York City.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I don't know that. So you just have to write what you know. So I don't know many perfect people. I know people who are a little imperfect, some that are downright mean, some that are a whole lot bitchy. And so you just draw on what you know to write. And that way your characters become real in your reader's eyes.
Okay, great. We're already halfway through and I've just been asking all my own questions because I just have a lot of questions. But so let's ask some from some of the people that are here. Teresa wants to know, she says, hi, Carolyn, it's an honor to hear your story. What authors have you read that really inspire you to write? I
am an eclectic reader. I'll read everything from Faulkner to the Cheerios box.
But so are there any that stand out? Who are your favorites?
Laverne Spencer was my favorite. We had a wake in my house when she retired. I like Sue Grafton. Right now I'm reading a arc from Nancy Nagel. I like her work. Sharon Sala, Lori Wilde. I also, when my husband was in college, I read a lot of the classics, enjoyed them. Dostoevsky, like I said, Faulkner.
Do you think you have to read a lot to be a good writer? Do you think it's part of the process and practice as well?
No.
No.
When my husband was teaching in Texas, he retired in Oklahoma, but alas, he could not feed me on what he made. So we had to go to Texas for 7 years so he could feed me. So I read a book a day and wrote a chapter a day.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so I read lots and lots of different authors, but I don't think, as a matter of fact, I'm very cautious about reading too much romance or too much women's fiction because I am terrified that some of their voice will come through in my book.
Mhm.
In my, that even without realizing that I might adopt something that they have said or that they have written. So I'm careful about that. I wouldn't want to steal anybody else's thunder.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. We've been talking a little bit in the Facebook group about whether or not you can read once you're a writer. Can you just read for pleasure? Are you always sort of taking it apart and looking at what they've done and looking at the technical elements of it?
Right. That is a problem.
Yeah,
So
I
you
feel
just,
like it changes how you read.
it does. It really does. So I do, when I have time to read, um, a lot of times it's to help out another author, like to read something for a blurb or something like that. But when I have time to read, it's usually mystery.
Oh,
Like I said, I really liked Sue Graft, and I read some Patricia Cornwell, um, whatever's in front of me.
it's a different kind of escape, right? If you escape into your work for the romance and then escape out of romance, so you're not at work, then you can head over to mystery and those sorts of things that
Right,
don't have the same crossover. Yeah.
right.
Okay, I have a good question from Tobias. How do you identify if and when something isn't working?
When it doesn't feel right, plain and simple. If it does not feel right, get rid of it. If you're fight, Jerry Clowers was one of my very favorite comedians. And he used to say, if you're arguing with yourself, you're about to mess up.
Oh, really?
So,
Yeah.
so if it just doesn't feel right, go back and look at it again and think, why am I even arguing with myself? If this is not working, and I've done that lots of times. I've had to go back and say, this just doesn't feel right. It doesn't work right. My character, it's out of character for my character. So redo it.
Redo it. Go back in, take it apart, figure out what's what, start again. Do you throw things
Yeah,
away ever? Do you have a drawer where you put things that haven't quite worked that you might go back to at some point?
absolutely. A file that
Yeah.
says deleted scene.
Yeah. Yeah, we did an interview with Ian Rankin last year, and he said he's got a file that's where he keeps things, and then he goes back through it regularly and finds little bits and pieces that he can then are like germination of an idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what you do. Um, it's kind of like the bloopers on the after a show.
Yeah.
You see those little bloopers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what didn't work. So you just go, just trust your gut. It'll tell you what to do.
If you're arguing with yourself, then you've got a problem. I think that's great advice. I've got someone here who wants to know how you organize your stories. Do you outline? Do you do all the research? Do you use software? How do you put it all together in the beginning before you start flying that jumbo jet?
My process begins with going where I am going to write the story.
To the setting?
Yes. Most of my stories are written in Texas now because my publishers like the voice of Texas, and it's what I sound like when I talk anyway, as you can well hear. I have the most redneck drawl in Texas.
I love your drawl. It's so great.
So I go where I am going to be writing about the setting. I did that when I was writing my very first historical book about the Oklahoma land rush. And there was a little bitty town up there in that area around Guthrie, Oklahoma called Dodsworth, and it's not there anymore. But in the story, I was writing that the women, the heroine there especially, was doing her laundry and swimming in this creek. Well, when I went and did the research, the creek was running about 10 feet down two red clay sides, and the water in it was muddy, to say the least. There's no way she was getting in that thing to go swimming in our little white 1919 whatever year. No, this was back in the 1800s. A little white swimming suit that they made those days. So I learned right quick, you don't write what you don't go see. So I did, I go see it first, then get an idea of the landscape, the actual setting, and then come home and start to write. I do some very good plotting in the car going to and from setting sites. And I've been to some sites when we got there, I thought, this is where I want to set. Yeah, I've been there and I've said, yeah, this is where I'm going to set a book. And I get there and it's that thing we were just talking about. It didn't feel right. So we have to go elsewhere. And that's my first thing, is to go see it. But we've traveled a lot in Texas and I love it.
Yeah, I can really feel that in your books, that sense of setting, you know, like I was saying, I feel like it's really clear there. Do you have any, I've got someone who's asking here if you have any advice for writing a really descriptive story that really sets that setting and lets people feel it. She or he says they want to make sure that their readers can taste their story too.
Give them detail, but don't give it to them in big clumps.
Okay.
Detail should be given through the character's eyes, or through the character's emotion or their feeling. If you start well, I had one lady tell me that she had written 40 pages and so far all she'd done was describe the bluebonnets in Texas. She's done lost that reader on the first page, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Be sure to let the reader feel and touch through the character's eyes, not through their eyes, not through my eyes. They don't care what Carolyn sees. They want to see what Trudy saw and felt. So that would be my advice there.
That's great advice. Okay. Oh man, we have a lot of questions here. So Annie says, with over 100 books, how do you keep your book's theme fresh and not redundant and not repetitive?
Well, each character has a different story and a different emotional level. Each story has a different setting. If you're going down the road, I don't care where you live, in London like you do, or in Oklahoma like I do, you pass hundreds of homes. Each person in that house has a story to tell. So each one would have their own set of emotions, that reactions to what they have felt or seen in their experiences. It would be totally different than the last book's characters. The Hope Chest dealt with a bipolar grandmother who didn't even realize she was bipolar. And her 3 grandkids come home to take care of things. And so they have a different set of emotions than in Hummingbird Lane, where one of the characters is a very sensitive, emotional type, sheltered woman, who has been, her experience was date rape. And how did she deal with it? So you just have different people dealing with different things. And when you tell your story, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, I love that. One question that I have around that is, like, I read Small Town Rumors recently, where which is about a woman who comes home from New York having had a failed marriage, And you sort of reveal backstory throughout instead of, you know, she doesn't get off the bus and you're not like, here's everything that happened to her. So how do you know where to pepper that in?
Just when she's feeling it, when she's flashback and seeing that, and when something on the street reminds her of something that happened to her in New York, or whenever she's when she goes home and she remembers that she didn't really like it there. And it is just what she is feeling. So you pepper in the backstory at that time. You treat it, one way you can treat writing is as a play you're watching on Broadway. You have act 1, act 2, act 3, and the curtain falls. You don't give away everything in act 1. A person told me one time, you have to make your reader work for it. You don't give them everything and say, okay, now this is going to happen. You make them work for it, make them keep reading, keep their interest. So
and does that give them, assume that, you know, because as a reader, it feels good to figure things out and it feels good to put pieces together, right? Then you feel like you're part of it, sort of.
Yes, that's absolutely right. You feel like you are, when I start writing, I don't know that character much better than my reader does. So I have to introduce the character, tell my reader what that character's physical appearance is, basically. Then I have to get to know the character's backstory and get to know that character's why she does what she does, or he does what she does. Then work toward letting my reader know what I have just found out.
I love that you're discovering it along with your readers as you're writing it.
Right. So it's like walking into the room with a stranger that you don't know that stranger. And they're not going to tell you, they don't feel comfortable enough to tell you everything that happened to them when they were 5 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old. You have to get to know them. And that takes time and patience.
Yeah. Okay. Ingrid, well, actually quite a few people in the questions are asking about your daily writing routine.
All right. I have backed down a little bit from 5,000 words a day, 6 days a week. So,
but until recently, that was the goal you set yourself?
Yes. Now, my mother, I think she got this from a traveling salesman. But the thing was, you can eat an elephant a bite at a time.
I love that.
So consider your elephant 5,000 words. So you get up in the morning and you write 1,000 words before you have breakfast. That's your goal. Then you go and you eat breakfast and you have, now that's not before you have coffee, that's just breakfast.
It's crazy. Yeah. Obviously.
Then you go and you have breakfast and you come back and you write 2,000 words. And then you go and you have lunch and you come back and all you have to do is write 2,000 more words and your day is done.
That's it. Well, I mean, that's a big job. And that's why. So what were you telling me? You know, until recently you were putting out 5-6 books a year?
Yes, at least 5 to 6. One year I put out 8 books and 3 novellas.
I mean, that's bananas. Everyone who's watching this, you don't have to do 8 books a year. But I love the idea of setting good goals for yourself. And you have this much before breakfast and this much. And, you know, breaking it into bite-sized, well, they're not really bite-sized for you, but mouthful-sized pieces throughout the day makes it, you can get the job done eventually. Right.
I saw a thing here that says how many pages per book. I write 300-page books, 90,000 to 100,000 words.
Do you ever, somebody's asking if you ever work on more than one at a time, or are you deep in one?
Tunnel vision. I work on one book unless edits come in. I can easily be working on a book and have first round edits on one book, copy edits on a second one, and something else on a third one. I just line them up as to when the due dates are and finish them off. But the essential thing, the one that I'm working on, is one book at a time.
Okay.
The creative part, it's just tunnel vision. Work on that book, finish it, then I go to the next one.
But Martin says, do you ever have a problem, A, with no ideas when you sit down at your table, or finding the words to fill 5,000 words a day?
Oh, no.
No, it just comes.
It might not be good writing. Nora Roberts told us one time that you don't have to write good writing every day. You just have to write. Yeah. You can always fix bad writing. You can't fix nothing.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, she told us that, and I've lived by that rule. It's not hard to find the words if you're in your character's head. Sometimes it's hard for me to remember that it's not just dialogue. I have to break up the dialogue with some action or some description, or tell how the person is feeling, and that's where that developmental editing comes in.
But is dialogue your happy place? Like, if you would you just dialogue all the way through?
You bet.
I think I feel like you're a chatter. I feel like you could chat and all day long, and so maybe that all comes out in your writing.
Right, it does. But I've got good editors, and they'll tell me, hey, you got too much dialogue here, let's do something else.
So what do you do when you come to the end of a day and it's just one of those days where it was just bad writing? Do you edit at all as you're going along, or are you just fully creative process? No, so tell me how that works.
I get up the next morning and I go over what I wrote the day before.
Okay.
And then a lot of times I will see, even at that point, hey, you've got 5 pages of dialogue. It's time, you've got to go in there and break that up. Or this is just a bad scene. I want to redo it. So most of the time I read what I wrote the day before I continue.
Okay. And do you often make a lot of changes there and go back and it's like, as part of your 5,000, sometimes is a chunk of that going back and rewriting the things that you wrote the day before?
No, a lot of times I have to be careful not to make the chapter too long. That I would have to, sometimes I would, if I add quite a bit to it, I will go in and make that 2 chapters rather than 1 chapter. So no, it's pretty much just the process.
I love it. I mean, I feel like everybody has that cycle, and for some people it's longer. They write something and then they edit it and then they go forward. And for some people that's a day, for some people that's a paragraph, for some people that's an hour, and for people that are doing National Novel Writing Month, it's a month. And everybody needs to find their rhythm, right?
Right. Whatever works for you. Don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. And so, if 5,000 words doesn't feel right for you, or if your editing cycle feels different, then, everybody finds their something that's doable. There's a few people that are talking about, for people that have, a day job or kids, a couple of people in here are talking about having kids. Any advice for helping them get the words done when they have a busy schedule and other responsibilities?
Well, I didn't start writing until my kids were grown and gone. I have a friend, though, that when she was working corporate, she got up at 3 o'clock every morning while it was quiet, and she wrote for 2 or 3 hours. And to this day, she still gets up at 3 o'clock every morning, even though she's retired, and she writes 2 or 3 hours, and then the rest of the day's hers. But I don't know. I haven't had to do that, write with kids. Now, I did a few times. Well, for 2 years, I kept my little 2-year-old granddaughter who wasn't very healthy. So I wrote with her in the room. Someone asked me one time, how do you write a sex scene? Nowadays, I'm not writing as many, thank goodness, because how many times can you write a sex scene and make it good? But anyway, I did write a sex scene with a 2-year-old having a tea party under my desk.
Yeah, I felt a little bit of that when I was preparing for this and I was reading some of the steamier books on my to-read list with my kids running in and out of the room. There's a slight
Yeah,
awkwardness there, but you know, those two things can coexist, right?
right. 2 different boxes. Just keep it in
Yeah.
2 different boxes.
Yeah.
I did a book club for a group in Dallas, and there was a lady there, and the question was, how old were you when you read your first romance book? And she said, I was 12. And they said, you mean your dad let you read romance at 12? She said, yes, we had the 5-page rule. He kissed her 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, turn the pages, and then start reading again. So
I love that.
So if the kids are in the room and looking over your shoulder, just he kissed her and start turning pages.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, okay, so we're running out of time. So a lot of the people that are here today are, you know, sort of on their first writing journey, and they're just beginning to figure out how to put it all together and how to plot and how to, you know, find that time to write. What do you wish you had known when you were starting out that would have helped you? That would be helpful.
I wish I would have known more about point of view. Keep your point of view true. You know, I didn't know enough about that. That would have been one thing that I would have wished I'd known more about. And maybe
Hang on,
just
tell me a little bit more about that. How do you keep your point of view true?
I get into my character's head and I don't leave until I change point of view. You can't be in one person's, you can't head hop. And I was guilty of that in the beginning. You've got to keep it true. If you are in Trudy's point of view, you can't jump over here in Hillary's point of view and tell how she felt about something. It's got to stay true. And that's what I wish I would have known more about. I've learned that through the years with help of some very good editors. So, but I think that would have been one of the things. The other, I would have liked to have known that just because you sell the first book doesn't mean you need to buy a dress to go to the red carpet for the movies on it.
Okay. So don't put all your eggs in the single book basket.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. So that would have been one thing I would have liked to have realized, that you have to build a readership. And each genre is different. So if you have a wonderful readership in, say, paranormal or historical or cowboy romance, and you say, okay, now I'm going to hop over here to this other genre, it's going to take you 5 to 10 books to build a readership in that genre. So when you're first beginning, I was at a conference once and I was standing behind a little girl. And again, I say little girl, I'm 73 years old almost. So to me, 50 is a little girl. But I was standing behind her and she was telling someone, I've got a book in paranormal. I've got one in contemporary. I've got one in historical. I'm going to, do all this. I said, let me give you a word of advice. Now you can take it and put it in the toilet if you want to, honey. But you pick out the one you like the best and you build a readership in that. Then you can go to someone else. You have to have a readership. I feel like even after 20 women's fictions books, maybe more, I haven't counted them lately, each time one comes out, my readership gets bigger. And that's what you want. So I wish I'd have understood a little more about readership.
Right. So find your people, find the ones that love what you do, and go deep into one, whichever one means the most to you, and stay with it. Wonderful. Oh, we're out of time. I still have a ton of questions here, and I don't know if you can see the chat, but everyone is saying thank you, Carolyn, for isn't Carolyn amazing? All these wonderful comments there. It makes such a difference to all these people who are just starting out to hear from someone who's been down this road and who, you know, has learned all the things that everybody here needs to learn. So I really, really appreciate you spending this hour with us and sharing your experience.
Well, it's been a wonderful hour, and I appreciate you inviting me. And for all those folks that are out there, keep after it, darlings. You cannot sell if you don't write.
Love that.
And my advice has always been two things: write, don't whine.
Oh,
you can
yes.
whine about it all day long and say, oh, I can't write today. I have to do this. I have to go do that. Write, don't whine. Get out there and write. Every day, write something. And it can be bad. It doesn't matter about that. Just write. Don't give up. There's always hope.
I mean, that is a perfect way to end the session. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. We'll see you at the next session coming up. We've got your 5 plotting non-negotiables with the amazing Dana Pittman. So you've got an hour off to go have a snack, have your lunch, and we'll see you back here for then. Thank you again, Carolyn. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.